A friend of mine asked me to help him out by painting one of his Mini Z models. These are made by Kyosho, and I'm pretty sure these are some kind of radio-controlled cars with switchable bodies. Now in this case it's a Subaru WRX, and it is pretty much exactly the same as normal. It's a plastic body which needs a little bit of preparation. Most of the panel lines are already nice and deep, but they could use a little bit more scribing just to give them a bit more depth and realism, and so they don't just fill up with paint really easily after a couple coats. Also, it does have some mold lines along the body. These were firstly masked off with some black marker to show me where they are, and also act as a guide coat, and then carefully sanded off one by one. Once most of those were removed, or once all of them of course were removed, I moved on to sanding the entire body down with 600 grit to get it nice and smooth, and also give a little bit of a grip for the primer and paint to stick to the plastic. The body was then nicely cleaned up, all of the dust was removed. I put it onto my Tamiya spray stand, moved it into the spray booth, and applied a couple coats of Tamiya gray primer. After the primer had dried, I moved on to applying a nice base coat of pepper gray. This is for all the carbon fiber decals that will be applied later to have a nice matching base coat, so if I have any missed spots that it won't show up that bad, as this matches pretty well with the carbon fiber decals. After finishing off the first coat, I let it sit and dry, applied a second coat, and achieved full coverage. I then let it dry overnight before applying all of the masking tape on the areas that needed to stay in the gray color for the carbon fiber decals to be applied on top later. Once all of the masking was completed, I put it back onto the Tamiya spray stand and moved it back into the spray booth as well to apply the honey gold. Of course, I started on those hard to reach, easy to forget spots first, and then moved on to a couple light coats for the rest of the body as well. first coat was applied, I let that sit and dry for about 5 minutes in between coats and then moved on to the second coat, which you can see completely transformed this color. With the second coat now applied, I again let it sit for another 5 minutes to cure, then applied a third and final coat of gold. Once that was said and done, I moved on to letting it cure for about an hour before touching it, then carefully started removing all of the masking tape. With the masking tape now out of the way, I let the body cure for another 24 hours before applying all of the carbon fiber decals, just to be sure that the paint is nice and dry and I won't mar it up once making all of these templates and or handling it while applying the carbon fiber decals. I made a quick couple templates with some masking tape and some markers, then transferred that to the carbon fiber decals that I'm using from the scale production, cut those out carefully, and then started placing them one by one. If you want to know more about this specific process, I'm going to do a quick time lapse here, but there are also multiple videos on my channel about the carbon fiber or decal application process. With the decal on the roof now placed, there is still a Panelline for the rear trunk or hatch that needs to be cut out for the decals to be folded nicely into it. So I took out a fresh blade, let the decals dry properly before attempting this, otherwise it might rip, then cut through the panel line carefully in one nice sweep. Added some decal softening solution just to fold the decals over into the edge and in that panel line to make it a nice even gap. And this was done to various other parts on the front bumper, like the grille, some of the air inlets, also the splitter and the rear diffuser, along with a couple other exterior pieces too. I again then let that sit to cure overnight before applying the clear coat. With the first light mist coat now applied, I let that sit and cure for about 5 minutes in between the coats, then moved on to applying a second coat. This coat was applied a lot heavier to achieve a nice finish to get that as smooth as possible. Once this second coat was applied, I let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes again, checked over it to see if it was nice and smooth as I wanted it to. It actually wasn't, so I decided to add a third and final coat, applied it in the same manner as I did this second coat, and then achieved the perfect finish that was after. After applying that third and final coat, that's pretty much it for this project. I'm going to leave it to sit and cure for about 2 to 3 days and then give it back to my friend.